Yeah.
Going anywhere. Okay. Better time.
Maybe in October.
You have a place up north though, don't you? Yeah. Even better. That's the only time you can use it, really. Otherwise, water's too cold. Just do all that snowmobiling, that stuff.
Just to CrossFit.
I do that too, but there's just not much snow anymore down here. It's just, I didn't
seeing it.
We don't see them there, yeah. Once or twice a year.
Nice. It's clean. This is what happens when you get stressed. There was just nothing.
I know it.
Yeah.
You know, so.
Good evening, everybody. It's class. We'll call this meeting of the Township Board to order. And after the Pledge of Allegiance this evening, we had a township employee who worked in our finance department passed away recently due to cancer, Anna Rosa. And we would like to have a moment of silence in her memory after the Pledge of Allegiance. So we'll remain standing after the pledge. So if everybody could please rise for the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Now we take a few moments for the moment of silence for Hannah. Thank you, everybody. Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Trustee Modica.
Here.
Trustee Cascarella.
Present.
Trustee Brewer.
Present.
Trustee Bowen.
Here.
Treasurer Fedewa.
Here.
Clerk Clark is present. Supervisor Fletcher. Here. You have quorum.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. We begin this evening with a special presentation from the Eaton County Drain Office to give us an update on the status of the Banks Drain. That's a major project that's underway. So if the representatives would like to come forward and take the podium here, that'd be great.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Chris Matson. I'm with Spicer Group, and I'm the project manager for the project on behalf of the Intercounty Drainage Board. And I'll let you introduce yourself.
This is Stacy Hassang. I'm the attorney for the Drainage District from Fahey Schultz Bursick Roads.
All right. So we wanted to come here this evening just to give a progress update for the drain project, and again, just open up and provide opportunity for questions. And if there's anything as we go through this, please just stop us and ask questions as we go. So I'm just going to really briefly touch on history. We've given sort of a version of this in the past. So we'll talk about the history a bit, our design status and schedule. A major thing with this project is the properties we've acquired to allow us to build it. So we'll give an update on all the property acquisition efforts. Talk about the pretty extensive utility coordination, cost estimates, and apportionment role for the project assessment role there. So just as a reminder, our Intercounty Drainage Board is comprised of a representative from both Eaton and Ingham counties, which the Drainage District serves, and a representative from the Michigan Department of Ag as chair for the board. So Brady Harrington is our chairman of the Drainage Board, and Robert Rose, Ionia County Drain Commissioner, as special commissioner for Eaton County, and Paul Pratt acting on behalf of Pat Lindeman as his deputy drain commissioner. So just to touch again on the existing conditions of the Bank Intercounty Drain, the current system is unable to handle a one-year storm and would need 4 times its current capacity to do so. Which just in terms of depth of rain is about a 2-inch rain over a 24-hour period. So as you can see to the right, our restrictive portion of the drain is a 30 and 48-inch pipe sitting side by side, and you can kind of see some of the needs for getting the water out of the system is much, much bigger than that. So our goal is to take the project to a standard 10-year design, which can handle the statistical amount of rain that we would experience every 10 years by upsizing pipes, providing regional detention, and roadside infiltration to again help decrease the size of the system needed.
So I want to spend just a minute to emphasize that it can't even handle a one-year storm. And so that means that you're going to have flooding. We don't have the capacity to handle a storm that would be predicted to happen once every single year, and you need 4 times the capacity. So I've been doing this for 27 years, I think. This is bad in terms of the condition and the capacity. And so this is not a usual situation where, oh, we need some upkeep here. No, this is different than that.
So a lot of the flooding that we've seen both just around the region and also as part of our stormwater modeling is in the areas of Clark and Thomas L, Saginaw Highway, sort of the low area of the drainage district, where if the system is taxed and it can't convey that water through, it's going to come out of the system there first and flood those areas. So we've seen a lot of confirmation of that in our work. Project schedule. So the project petition was originally received in November of 21. We held a practicability hearing at Waverly High School, April of 22, and then another hearing was held, the necessity hearing, March of 23, again at Waverly High School. Since the necessity hearing was held, shortly after that, engineering design started. So we've been working on this from an engineering perspective since May of 23. Since then, we've been trying to hold regular meetings with property owners, major stakeholders, utility owners, et cetera.
Can I have a quick question?
Sure.
I know we've been approached as a board by citizens regarding this issue for a number of years now, but since these things are underway and there's been some formal presentations and concepts of how to resolve and stuff, has anybody come out and said they oppose it?
So you go ahead.
We've had a handful of people asking for more information to try to understand it better. I can't think of, I'm trying to think of a specific blatant like opposition to the project. There's been lots and lots of question asking and trying to understand what we're trying to do, or a lot of questions come with the property acquisition, like why did you buy this property? What's going to happen to this property? Those kinds of things with neighboring property owners.
So a couple things is, I don't think anyone questions the need for this. It is not an inexpensive project. And so we'll get more about that. So I think if there's a concern, it's not, should you be doing this project or what type? It is, I need to mentally prepare myself. I need to financially prepare myself for this type of project. And so the more information we can provide to you to be able to do that. And then I also think people were surprised to find out that they had drain pipes underneath their house. As you know, this is a system that's over a century old, and they're not recorded easements because that's not what the statute was. And so that came as a surprise to people. We need to take care of that. And so I think the property owners that we've dealt with have been very accommodating and grasping that and now moving forward.
I think you alluded to the answer that I was probing on, is the fact that they were aware there was going to be a significant cost to this.
Yep.
And then the other thing, and it sounds like they are, and then the other thing, and when they're surprised to find a 100-year-old drain abandoned, non-functioning, we'll be going through a process soon to abandon those drains formally.
Right. So there's portions of this that are still in the ground from 1922. Right. So those sections of the drain are being addressed. That drain is there legally. There's easement around that drain. Right. So in some areas, we're going to replace it. In some areas, it has already been replaced. And some of those sections are just, they've been developed around, and the stormwater is handled in a different way. So it's kind of a mixture, but that entire system, we're looking at it from end to end to see where.
Great. Thank you.
See where it needs improvement. All right, so looking through to sort of the end of our design schedule, looking into construction. So we are planning for bidding out to contractors in September and October of this year. So through the end of 24, we'll have completed that design, the permitting, the different utility coordination items, easement acquisition. So bidding the project, September, October, there's certain parts of that into November and December that are more procedural after the actual contractor bid is complete. But our goal is to start construction in early 2025. There's portions of this that will include demolition of certain structures on different properties, which that stuff is going to happen first. And we'll get into a little bit of that here, but there's definitely a sequence to how we need to build the project.
And so far, I think we set the project timeline a year ago, and we've been on schedule, which not a lot of big projects can say that. But I'm very pleased that we've kept it moving efficiently.
Right. So some of the impacts to the timeline are the utility conflicts. And I'll get into this a little bit further on in the presentation, but we're meeting regularly with all of the utility owners. There are some very minor utilities in the form of or in the lens of obstructions to this kind of a project, say the fiber optics, some of the more flexible utilities to work around, but then there's some very immovable objects in the form of, large water main, large gas main, duct banks for AT&T. So there's a lot of things to iron out with utility companies and conflicts.
Yeah, when you imagine underneath the street, you don't think about the various, all the utilities that are under there. And then at the beginning of the presentation, you saw what size pipe we're going to what size pipe we're going to. And to make room to maneuver through that has probably been the biggest challenge that we're facing.
Right.
Unlike other projects, that's the biggest project challenge that we're facing for this one.
Right. So it's finding the space to build it, essentially, where we are working 90% of the time where the drain is today. But even then, finding the space to build it in that same footprint. Easement acquisition could be an impact. There's still some easements needed on the project. We don't expect that that's going to be a large impact. And then the permitting, we've had permit applications submitted for a couple months now with Eagle, and that, if anyone's ever gone through that process, is sometimes just a waiting game. So we're working through that. We don't feel like there should be any issues there, but we'll have all those in hand before we go to bid.
No, there's no showstoppers on this page. It's just getting the timing of all three of them to meet a timeline of our project.
Yep. So a little bit more detail here on the design status. You can see the things at the left that we have made our way through so far. And really what we're working on right now is really the fine-tuning, final alternatives, final construction plans that the utility coordination is going to go on through into construction, but getting the utility conflicts identified and basically understanding who's making the accommodation. Is it the utility company coming to move their utility? Is it something incidental to construction that we're going to do as part of the project? Kind of ironing out all of those details. So looking next to property acquisition, essentially there's two buckets for different properties that we've purchased as part of this project. One is for regional stormwater detention, and the other is just to build the drain. So on the left-hand side here, we've purchased 3 properties to build regional stormwater ponds within the drainage district. And looking at the drainage district, it is almost 100% built out. And I would say our 4300 West Saginaw parcel would not have been an option if it hadn't have been for sale during design. This is the O'Rafferty High School. This is Morley bought it most recently, was looking to redevelop it, but it had been many things over the years, a bank for most of the time. There's 2 other smaller properties. So the 26 acres at 4300 and then 5 acres total at the other 2 parcels make up the areas for regional detention.
And detention becomes really important because you're either storing water or you're moving it through a pipe. And the more water you can store, the smaller your pipe can become. When I say smaller, we're still talking taller than me.
Right.
But without that detention, it almost got to the point where it wasn't going to be possible to put it under the road because of the size that is needed. So the regional detention and the ability to buy those properties to do this saved the project, in excess of $10 million. It was a huge win for the project.
Yeah, thank you, Chris and Stacy. Has any of the residents in this area contacted you about how those storm water centers are going to look? I know I've heard from a couple people, and I don't know if they reached out to you as well to just get an idea of what that's going to look like for those that live in those areas, particularly on West Saginaw.
Yeah, we have, if you want to talk about that a little bit.
Yep. So one of the major stakeholders, I guess, around the 4300 West Saginaw property is St. Gerard Church. So that's been a big piece of coordination that we've undertaken, essentially identifying them as a major project stakeholder because of the amount of land that they own. And having such a large facility essentially adjacent to the stormwater pond. We've had, there's been a lot of emails back and forth, but we've had, I think 2 or 3 formal meetings with them just to talk through details, talk with staff both on site there at St. Gerard and also the staff from the diocese that wanted to come out and ask some questions about the project.
And then we've also had meetings with the next door property owners to 511 North Waverly, exactly next to the apartments. What is that going to look like? Is that going to be a water feature or something that's not nice to have around? So I think we've answered all their questions and reassured them. But if anybody else has questions, we've created a project website, which we'll talk about later. There's a link on the township's website to that. We have email, phone number, whatever is needed. Anytime a property owner has a question, they should not hesitate to ask about it. Not soon enough. Feel free, anyone should feel free to contact us with any questions that they have at any point.
Great, and you do have a good website. I like that website.
I'll say thank you, we really did it. I'll say thank you.
So the other group of properties is for drain construction. So there were 3 parcels in the Thomas L. Parkway neighborhood where the drain was underneath the homes. So we've, at this point in time, taken ownership of all the properties. I think we only have possession on 2 of them, just to accommodate a property owner in moving. So those 3 homes on the right-hand side will be demolished essentially to provide the drain to be there and to be accessible for maintenance into the future. And essentially those won't be able to be built on as homes in the future just because of the drain and the drain easement that's there. Essentially the drain easement covered over the entire parcel, which if were to be built in today would have all the restrictions of no permanent structure construction. So essentially the drain staying in the same location as it is now, but we're making it available for maintenance into the future. We had looked at some alternatives to move the drain. 1 or 2 of the properties may have been there were some alternatives to avoid purchasing the properties. Going down the street would cause a lot of other costs to replace the street and a lot of utilities as an alternate. And this was a lot cheaper of an option to keep the drain right where it was.
And we'll coordinate with the neighboring properties with regard to what do we do with this property when we're done and pipes under the ground, grass is growing to ensure that everything takes place well.
Are they contiguous, those 3 properties?
No, they are in separate locations. And I don't know if I have a map showing each of those, but no, they're, if you're familiar with Elizabeth Street, between the 2 Thomas L. Parkway, the east and west Thomas L. The first 2 properties are one's at the west end of Elizabeth and one's at the east end of Elizabeth. And then the 3rd property is up at the corner of Willow in Thomas L., the southeast corner.
Okay.
So we may end up just working with the neighbors and deeding but retaining an easement half to each neighbor on each side so they can use it as their yards. We don't need to own it. We just need to make sure that nothing's built on top of it so that in the future, hopefully we never have to deal with this again, but in the future, if that new pipe needs work, there's no structures.
Right.
Anyway.
So again, looking at those regional stormwater properties, you can see here Saginaw Highway is running essentially through the center of this map in this image here. The larger property on the upper side of the image is the 4300 Saginaw property, and then down to the lower right hand side are the 2 Waverly parcels, and we actually step through those. So on the next slide here you can see a little bit more of a blow up there of the Saginaw Highway property. So it's between Robbins and Clark, just on the north side of Saginaw Highway. It's directly south of St. Gerard Church there. So the area in yellow roughly signifies where the stormwater pond would be, and the areas in orange show new pipes coming into and leaving this area.
And so in the questions, have we been working with property owners? We have been, like this is what we're having the meetings with St. George Church about. And just like the neighboring property owners where we're putting the pipe in, are there uses, this is going to be dry in several situations. So partnering with the church as to ensuring that property is utilized to its best use when it's not being used to stormwater. And so we've been meeting with them about that as well.
To that point, if you're having conversations with St. Gerard, is there expectation they'll have exclusive use of that?
So first, the drainage district will retain uses of it because it's ultimately going to be a stormwater. And so that's the things that we're just beginning conversations about that. What could be the uses for that?
I'll make a comment after your presentation on this. Thank you.
So the next property here, 314 Dibble, 219 Waverly, this is down closer to Michigan Avenue. This is the southern of the two Waverly parcels. Again, this is a 2.5 acre piece of property that's adjacent to the drain that can provide some regional detention for the project. And then similarly, 511 North Waverly. So this property purchase was coordinated with the apartments to the south. This is just south of Saginaw Highway, near Saginaw and Waverly there. And they had a lot of those same questions. What is this pond going to look like when it's not in use? Is it going to collect water? Is there going to be mosquitoes? Is it going to be safe being adjacent to a residential area? So those are the kind of things that we're actually getting questions on the various detention parcels, and they'll drain dry outside of storm events. There's going to be a pilot channel through the large pond, so that water will get concentrated into a channel in the bottom of that basin. But during storm events, it'll fill up and then it'll drain back out. So again, just more on the 4,300 parcel, looking to demolish starting in 2025. And the plan right now, and this goes back to the purchase of the property, is to split off frontage for redevelopment. There's plenty of space there to provide detention for the entire portion of the drain south of it. And splitting off that frontage can allow for some marketing of the sale of that parcel for redevelopment that would make sense.
And provide, and then it's this cost savings for the overall project because we're selling off part of the property that we purchased.
Yes.
So just a question on this. You said it's 650 feet of frontage. That's the width of this or the depth?
I believe that's the width of the redevelopment area. If you wanted to switch to the next slide there.
And then, what's the depth there? Because I know there have been discussions, and prior to being on the board, I served on planning commission, and I know we had a lot of discussions about changing zoning on properties along there to facilitate more redevelopment. And I just wonder if there is sufficient room, it may be advantageous to incentivize redevelopment of that. If there's a little more depth, that creates a little more flexibility. I know there's some real challenges, we've had to do, variances and special zoning to accommodate a lot of those lots. And if we can address that up front by allowing a little more depth in the area that would be available for redevelopment, I think it creates a lot more opportunity.
And to that point, we've had some discussions on the depth and, initially taking cues from the neighboring parcels, but essentially thinking, well, would it be more advantageous to have it set up to split into several smaller parcels or two larger parcels, or keep it one parcel? I think all of those details, as we kind of finalize things, whatever makes the most sense for the redevelopment is really, the direction we want to head in. If it's a certain type of development in a certain depth due to, potential parking areas and different uses, we want to try to consider those and, whatever makes the most sense.
I appreciate that flexibility there.
Yeah, Ken. Well, thank you, Trustee Coscarella. This is the thing I wanted to address the board and them after the presentation, but I'm just going to make a comment. just overall, I don't know why we have an assumption that this needs to be redeveloped. I mean, if the whole corridor is developed, we don't need another strip mall there. We don't need other small parcels there. And I would question what return you would get in selling these things. Yeah, you might sell the property. I don't know how much that would cost, how much profit you'd make on that. I don't know what sort of return we'd get as far as an increase in tax base in this township for that area. I don't think it's needed. I think it's just adding to the problem. We don't need another strip mall. That's my personal opinion. But what I would like to do before you guys, you know, have an assumption where the board is at, that I believe the board needs to have a policy discussion about this issue. And I think what we also need for that policy discussion is this thing even attractive to a private developer? And I think what we need to do is go out and solicit some developers that, you know, given the parameters of this, is this an attractive parcel to even invest in, given the plethora of different strip malls and other small businesses that we have along the East Saginaw corridor, when at the same time we have developers coming in here and taking businesses from the central corridor and moving them out to the west. I think we need to really slow down and think about this from a policy perspective. So before the Drain Commission just assumes that this is the right direction we want to go in, and you may have a different opinion and you're entitled to that, I understand. I believe the board needs to just have a policy discussion on this once we get some background information from staff, and so we can make an informed policy decision if that's the direction we want to go. And what are the other alternatives that we could have there that maybe would have additional green space for accessibility? There's nothing there now. There hasn't been. They took away the golf course. Not that that was a park, but there's absolutely nothing we've talked about on this board in the nearly 12 years I've been here. Is what can we do for the Saginaw corridor, especially focused on the East Saginaw corridor. And here we have an opportunity to do something. And I think that we don't need to take a blind eye and lose this opportunity without the proper discussion and foresight. So that's what I'm just imploring with the board, that we have a policy discussion about this before the Drain Commission just assumes that's the direction that we want to go with their blessing. So I'm just throwing that out there.
Could we have you guys continue the presentation? And I agree with that. We should have the discussion, but could we have this finished, and so we get bogged down in the discussion about issues we're not deciding tonight?
There's no for sale sign going up at the end of the year for this. It's not going to have anything happen until after construction, which is a multi-year process. So we're not in a hurry with regard to that topic.
And logistically speaking, it's honestly going to be the staging area for our contractors to build the job up front there. So, or at least
for a period of time.
Yeah, for a while.
Yep.
All right. Looking further into some of the major coordinations on utilities and road construction. So you can see the different entities there. Specifically, though, I wanted to touch on the Delta utilities. And if we can switch just to the next slide here. What we've set up, and we've had this set up for several months, is a weekly standing meeting to meet with engineering, utilities, and the manager's office on just coordination of water and sewer conflicts, and just coordinating this project to the current location and state and condition of the township's utilities. So we have that standing meeting on the calendars every week. Sometimes as we're working through major parts of that, we might push a meeting off to the next week. However, we're coordinating those conflicts. What we're finding is that there's portions of this that sections of water and sewer are just, being replaced incidental to the fact that we're doing this project. So we've identified a handful of those areas already, and we're getting those prepared in the project documents and approvable to the township engineer and utility director, and having everybody's blessing before we go and bid out a project, just to make sure it follows all the standards in the township with regard to those utilities. All right, project website. So this website has been up since I think about mid-June. This project website, bankdrain.org, will provide At this point in time, hopefully the answer to a lot of frequently asked questions that we're seeing, it's going to provide history on the drain and the development of the drain and the development of the area. Project schedule, which you'll see out there today, is pretty similar to what we have in this presentation tonight. It's a pretty rough schedule until we get details from contractors and we have some things under contract.
Quick question, is your bankdrain.org website, is that fully functional?
Yes.
I tried it today. It didn't work for me.
Okay.
Just to let you know, of course, I did it on my lap or my desktop. I didn't do it on my iPad.
That might be something I can help you with personally.
Nothing would come up.
Okay. The other main function of this website is there is a pretty robust contact page. So we have a phone number for people to call and leave a voicemail. To have a question answered and a phone call returned. There's an email set up. There's actually a contact form if you wanted to just fill in your name and contact information and your question into an online form, and that'll get submitted to be returned. What this is going to become more useful for as we go forward is during construction, you'll be able to see the construction progress and the current work areas and where the future work areas are, and be able to really anticipate and gain insight on expectations with construction. Because if it's the smallest project or a project of a larger scale like this one, there's always people who don't know what was planned for construction and are inconvenienced, and we're trying to cut down that inconvenience as much as possible.
Yeah, this is not a 1 week project. Right. This is not a 1 month project. And so we want to communicate.
Right. All right. Project cost. So our current preliminary estimate is an all-in figure of $60 million for this project. And that number, it includes all of the engineering and soft costs to finance the project, our estimate of construction at this time. So that's an all-in figure there. That number, I believe, was the estimate that we provided at the last meeting. We're still, as we're working things and refining, we're still looking at that figure. However, some more recent information is through the efforts of Eaton County and funding requests through the state of Michigan and the federal government, have a couple appropriations that we've gained for the project. So I believe the state of Michigan has budgeted $5 million for the project specifically. And Gary Peters is making a spending request recommendation for $6 million for the project, which that process is still out ahead of us as far as finally securing that money and having it in hand. However, those asks were made. Huge kudos to Eaton County, the controller's office, in doing a lot of heavy lifting to get those applications in. So hopefully there's an $11 million that will come off the top and benefit all parts and portions of payers on the project. So looking again at the assessment rolls, specifically the Eaton County portion, because as the project comes down from the inter-county board, it's divided and split between counties for overall percentages, and then each county runs, develops, and puts in place an assessment roll for the entities in their county. So looking at Eaton County's portion, there's likely going to be a 95% split between Eaton and Ingham. So Ingham will be paying 5%, Eaton 95%. And that is going to be divided up between different entities for benefits to county roads, benefits to public health, and benefits to state highways. After those are taken off the top, the remaining percentage of the project that hasn't been paid by those larger entities will be spread to property owners. And
is that all property owners in the township, or
that would be all property owners within the drainage district that is defined for the watershed for the bank inter-county drain.
Okay.
So there's essentially 1,800 property owners inside of that drainage district.
And will all 1,800, if that's the number, benefit from the drain update, or are there some that will not be relieved from drainage?
That's the point. Thank you for giving me the segue because I wanted to make sure that everyone understood this. So if you are in the drainage district, you are contributing water to the drain. So when a drop of water falls within that drainage district, it eventually gets to the Bank Intercounty drain that is going to go out to the Grand River. So you'll be getting an assessment. All assessments won't be equal. There's a number of factors we're going to get in. But then the second part of your question is the big one, trustee. And that is everybody going to feel relief?
Right.
So we want to be very clear. This is not the savior project to everyone in this district. This is providing an outlet that will have a 10-year storm design. So there are a web of different drainage systems that are not part of our project that outlet to the stream. We can't do you have to fix the outlet first before you can do anything else. And so if you're living on one of those side drains that has a problem, that you still may be experiencing some flooding because your water can't get to the project that we're at. And so this is the first and necessary and most expensive piece of that puzzle, but none of the rest of it can really happen to get that relief until this is done. So in the end, will there be improved drainage? Absolutely. Are people still going to have flooding problems? Yes, because there are these tributary systems that can't get work done until we get this main system done. Mm-hmm. And again, this is this 10-year storm design, so that's not meant for some of the floods that we've been seeing recently too. So that is the one takeaway I want everyone to understand. This will provide relief, but it's not a guarantee against flooding in all circumstances.
And that's an important takeaway, as you said. And this comes up every time you're here, you do the presentation, we make sure that that is said, because we don't want people to come back and say, I'm paying for this and it's not helping me. It's still flooding in my backyard or my yard. So I appreciate how you walked us through this today. It was very clear, but you're always very upfront about that every time you come here.
We don't want this project to be a surprise to anyone, although that may be the case. I mean, when they get the letter in the mail with an estimated assessment amount, we don't want this to be the surprise. That's why we have a website for people to ask questions now. So spread the word. And then we don't want it to be a surprise that this project can only do so much. Right. Those are the two things we want to try to communicate more than anything else.
So as part of the assessment role in a project as a whole, the cost will be financed and it will be spread over 30 years. So diving more into the assessment role, you can see some of the preliminary figures here for the different at-large entities. Eaton County, 17% based on road runoff. MDOT 2% based on road runoff, and then Delta Township 25% at large for public health benefit of its residents. Now, there's always in addition to this, if there's a supplemental benefit that's understood between the project and the different entity, if there's certain things asked for, especially to provide for each of those entities, there's an opportunity to pass that cost directly on. So if the County Road Commission wanted something specific and special as part of the construction of this project, that cost would get passed on to that entity.
So I guess that kind of addresses my question when you were saying that there were some water and sewer pipes that might be switched out in the course of you doing your pipes for the stormwater drain. I assume that the township would bear that cost because those are our pipes for sewer and water.
So the way that we have been coordinating this is there's certain things that are incidental that are just because we want to make the pipe larger and improve the drain, the water main needs to be relocated or the sanitary sewer needs to be shifted over and rebuilt. Those incidental costs would be spread as just a project cost to construct the drain. Yeah. Now, if there was a request to replace all of this water main up this street as part of maybe to benefit from the extra or from the contractor being there and bidding as a smaller part of a bigger project.
Yeah, you've got
that would be considered a supplemental benefit that would be passed on directly for those costs. But at this point, we're considering all the incidental costs just to build it. You know, we've not gotten any special request for for water and sewer improvements
Okay,
as part
that
of
was my
this.
next question, so thank you.
So looking at a breakdown of the property owner portion of the assessment roll, as far as a count of parcels, most of the parcels in the drainage district are residential. There is a larger area of commercial properties as opposed to this 793 split here. But 7% of the total parcel count is commercial. One thing to note here is that church properties are liable for assessment of for a drain project, county drain project, inter-county project. And the township, county, school district, publicly owned parcels are exempt from these special assessments. However, they do receive that at large.
The township does. Yep.
The township does, correct. And the county for their benefits.
So as an example, St. Gerard's is one of the biggest property owners in this watershed, and accordingly, one of the biggest assessments will be levied to the church. And that's why we wanted to ensure that we met with them personally to go over that. They're taking this very seriously, as you can imagine, have asked lots of good questions. And we've met with them in person twice. We expect to meet with them as we continue through.
Yep.
Is anybody exempt? Or is everybody included in this assessment?
So if you are in the watershed, you are liable for an
Right.
assessment, except for, as Chris mentioned, any governmental entities' properties are exempt. So if it's a federal building, federal, state, township, county, school, those are all exempt properties.
Public school property.
Public school, not private school.
Right.
So, but the county can get an assessment for benefit to roads. And the township gets an assessment for public health. So that even though their properties are exempt, they're still going to receive an assessment. And if you saw this, the county and the township are the two highest entities being assessed.
So,
Chris?
yes.
Sorry, before you, because I think you're getting close. So before you move off of the assessments, can you share a little bit about, you mentioned St. Gerard, obviously their property is very large. I don't know if it matters uses and things like that, but how do you calculate, what are those factors that go into determining someone's assessment? And then have you come up with any estimates, and realizing these aren't final, but if it is the $60 million cost based on certain factors, kind of what the average homeowner in the drainage district might see in the assessment and that, but just those factors I think are really
I think you're
helpful.
segueing nicely into our next couple of slides. So thank you for that.
Or the rest of this slide.
Oh, the rest of the slide, yeah.
So the kind of things that we take into account when we're establishing a recommendation for an assessment roll are the use or the cover of the land. We're trying to right size the apportionment with the amount of runoff coming off of these parcels.
So contribution, how much rainwater what's your portion of that going to the pipe?
So with that, we are trying to understand for all properties, how much of that is covered over by pavement, roofs, how much of that is landscaped lawn versus woods, and taking those different proportionate shares to spread that portion of the assessment based on land cover. So generally there's on other projects, there might be like a standard coefficient for commercial property that's improved or industrial improved. And the same for smaller residential properties and on through. So there's certain standard coefficients for this project. We're looking at every parcel and we're providing a specific coefficient that explains how that property was used, sort of a snapshot in time when we developed this apportionment.
So question, because I know for some property owners that assessment's going to be a burden. They may be really challenged by that. Will you be making any recommendations? Are there modifications, improvements to properties that those owners can make that can reduce the runoff that might reduce that assessment?
So great question. And so let's unpack that a little bit. the big answer is no to a regular homeowner. But what we're looking at is, as Chris mentioned, so when we're taking this amount minus the grants, you're going to see about 45% of this project roughly paid for between the MDOT, the county, and the township. And so for that remaining amount, we're trying to keep it, to make the costs as affordable as possible. We're going to spread it over 30 years. That's the maximum amount that you can spread it under the statute. And so we're looking at that being a line item on people's property taxes in the winter only, not this December, next December. So it would be December of 2025 would be the first time that would go on the roll. And so when we're looking at a couple of different things, so if you own a half-acre parcel and Trustee Bowen owns a half-acre parcel, they might not get the exact same assessment for a couple of reasons. Even if you have the same size house, same size driveway, etc., it depends where you are in the drainage district. Because if your property is right on the drain, and your property is one of those tributary veins off the drain, and you're not getting a direct relief, you're going to be assessed slightly different than someone who's directly on the drain. So we have a multitude of factors going into this per property. So to say what's your average property owner, I'm going to give a very lawyer-like answer. It depends, because it depends where you are, what drainage systems you are on to get to that point. And we're needling down on those as best as we can.
Thank you.
And I guess with that, we're to the end of the presentation, and we've provided the contact information up here again as needed. But are there any other questions or comments, concerns?
Well, I think you're doing a good job of spreading the word out to the community now. People are starting to understand this project's coming, because I know the anxiety of the residents is raising greatly, waiting for that letter to come and tell them how much their specific assessment's going to be. So continue to spread the word with as much information as you can, but I'm sure once those letters hit, there will be a lot of angry, upset people that we'll have to do some more education to help explain why the project is needed and stuff.
And the more we can do to have them call before November, so we don't get all those phone calls at the same time to hear what we're doing, is great. Thank you.
Well, I think until they get their actual assessment is when you'll hear from them. I don't think there's much you can do in
As we
advance
get
to prepare
closer,
them.
we may be able to provide a little bit more of a ballpark estimate. We're just not at the point where that's possible right yet.
Look forward to it.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot. We appreciate that.
At the same time, thank you for everything that you are doing for this. This is an ongoing problem that has been an issue for those property owners, those residential and commercial properties. And it is the cost of home ownership, the cost of property ownership, the cost of being in a certain area where there's a lot of water. It just the way the soils are and all that sort of thing. And so thank you so much. You two make a great team in presenting and keeping this project moving forward so that some of our residents can see some relief and we can all see public benefit. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Have a great night.
Thank you. We have the agenda before us. Any additions, deletions? Motion approved. Andrea.
I move to approve the agenda as presented.
Is there support?
Support.
There is support. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. Motion carries. Next up, we have a public hearing for a noise waiver request, and we have a request from Vanio Hall for a waiver of the noise ordinances between 5 and 11 p.m. on August 23rd at 6704 West St. Joe Highway. So we'll open the public hearing. Is there anybody here in the audience who'd like to speak in response to that request for a noise waiver? Seeing no one coming forward, then I'll close the hearing and I'll move that the Delta Township Board approve the request by Vanio Hall for a waiver of the noise ordinance between the hours of 5 p.m. and 11 p.m. on August 23rd, 2024 at 6704 West St. Joe Highway for the purpose of holding a neighborhood concert. Is there support?
Support.
There is support. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. Motion carries. We have a lot of other great updates in our packet on other projects. They're all very important as well going on in the township. So I encourage everybody to take time to read, to get updated on those. Now we have public comment for any topic this evening. So now is your opportunity from the public to come forward for public comment. 3 minutes, and just step up to the podium and state your name and address for the record.
Good afternoon. My name is El Salas, owner of Lansing Athletics in the Lansing Mall. My address is 10286 Lafayette Lane, Diamonddale, Michigan. And my reason for being here today is to follow up on comments that I had in April 1st. And as you know, it's regarding the safety and security of the Lansing Mall. Lately, we're still having issues. Unfortunately, we had a bad one 10 days ago at the Rainbow store. It's a bad one. People got hurt. I was told last time I was here about we're asking for security. And you asked me to meet with the Lansing management, the Lansing Mall management, which I did. And fortunately, they are willing to work with us. They did put 4 more security guards. So they got a total, I believe, of 11 now. They do walkthroughs at least twice a day to make sure, especially when there's a lot of people in there, which is very good. And we're happy about that. They give us this, that we can, in case of an emergency, we call this number. The security, the same security office, all we gotta do is tell them Nora, and they'll see it on their caller ID, who's calling. They'll go there right away, which it's good. They're doing their part. You asked me to do that last time I was here, so I did that. And they're willing to see what else they can help us with. Unfortunately, what we're asking for is the County Sheriff Department to do a walkthrough. They can have all the security guards they can put in there, but there's a procedure. They cannot stop somebody from stealing. They cannot go outside the parking lot, get their license plate number or who it is. It's a procedure that's there, and we have a procedure in the stores. As you know, I broke my policy of not chasing nobody, and I got hurt. What we're asking is what happened on June 30th. There was the State Journal. There's a lot of you probably seen it. Sunday State Journal, June 30th. They were having issues at Zapzone. It's another business that's inside the Lansing Mall. And what Lieutenant Preston Dahlgren stated on the State Journal was, once they started doing drive-bys in that area, they were able to contain this. So my question to you is, that's all we ask for. Why can't they do walkthroughs in the Lansing Mall? Not only our customers, us as business owners, we're taxpayers for this area of Delta Township. We want our safety, not only for us, for our employees, but for our customers. And you don't have to be like it used to be in the past. A criminal or individuals that are up to no good, they see somebody walking around, a law enforcement officer, it's gonna make a big difference. A big difference. They're gonna say, oh, they're back. And I guarantee you this will stop, or at least what happened to Zapzone. It didn't completely stop, but like Lieutenant Dahlgren stated, it almost came to a stop. It will work. I believe that in unity and working together, we can make things happen. I believe what we all, the Lansing Mall, are just asking you, if you could find it in your heart and see what we can work together. What else can we do? You asked me to do this, we did it. Not only me. A few business owners, we met with management, and they're trying to help us the best they can. before something else happens, we'd like to see if you could help us. All we're asking is maybe twice a week, 15 minutes. 15 minutes just to do a walkthrough. Those bad people are gonna see them. I guarantee you, they're gonna back off, just like they are right now with Settle. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate you coming here.
Did you ask a question?
If I may, just a question for you, and I apologize for not recalling, but do you know offhand if with these incidents, if they're occurring at certain times of the day or evening?
Yes, I do.
What is that?
They happen in the evening and usually only on Fridays and Saturdays and Sundays.
Okay.
And that's when for what I understand, the sheriffs used to walk. That's when all the kids are out of school or they're out there. That's when we're busier also. That's when we pay our bills. We make our money to pay our bills. But then when these things happen, it ruins it. But yeah, it happens. And that's what I ask. Somebody could just come like on a Friday just for 15 minutes. Walk through the Saturday, 15 minutes. That's all. But take it to walk them off.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else in the audience this evening would like to speak during public comment? Now is your opportunity to come and speak on any topic.
Good evening. My name is David Howell, resident of Delta Township. I live at 9487 Guinea Road. On June 10th, at the June 10th board meeting, there was some discussion that was raised regarding the possible repeal of Delta Township Ordinance Section 12-44 that has to do with municipal tax abatements to any class of housing projects. That ordinance has been on the books since February of 1977. And in particular, it had to do with pilot, which, as you know, is it's a tax abatement and it's a payment. A developer or owner of a housing development makes a payment based on monies that are collected in rents minus any utilities, and then a percentage of that, which is decided by the governmental authority, is the payment in lieu of the tax that would normally be placed on the developer for the assessed value of the property. I don't know if it was tabled or not, but
it was not tabled. Yeah, what we asked was the staff to look into it, research, and then bring back that research for a discussion at a possible future meeting. So it hasn't been tabled at all.
And that was going to be my question: is when is the next time that the board is going to discuss it in public session?
Yeah, that's absolutely. And I don't think we have an exact date yet. Brian, do you know when they'll be coming back?
I don't, Mr. Supervisor, but we'll work to bring it back expeditiously.
Yeah, what we can do is, make sure keep in touch with us, and we'll make sure that anybody that provide your name to, the manager's office and stuff, and anybody who's interested in being part of that conversation, we'll make sure that we try to notify when we know an exact date when it's going to be on the agenda, so that we can get the public input as we have that discussion.
Great. And I just wanted to make a comment on the presentation that was made by the representatives. First of all, it was a very thorough, informative presentation. I read all the material that was in the agenda, that was sent out. And it's pretty comprehensive. But my question is, I'm not aware that any detailed information of that manner has ever been put in the Delta Now, Delta Magazine, or the Talk of the Township, so that the residents, if you want to be more transparent and get more information out to people and maybe avoid, residents feeling overwhelmed in December of 2025, when they get their tax assessment, for the drain. I would strongly recommend that the board or that the township, start communicating, with the residents so that they're aware of what's coming.
And the bank's drain project is communicating with the residents, they're the entity that's moving forward with this. I know they've had public opportunities for the public to come and hear presentations. They created the website and stuff, and we have put stuff in our Delta Now and stuff, not that full 20-some page PowerPoint, but we have put information out letting people know that it's coming and they need to educate themselves on it. So the bank's drain group needs to be the one to continue that public education each step of the way so that they keep the public informed. But we definitely hear that they need to continue to get the word out.
But I would add, Mr. Supervisor, we'll continue to do so.
And we have,
we'll continue to do so.
Right.
So, but point taken. Thank you.
Right. I just think the information needs to be circulated.
And that's why they've had the public, the public sessions where they invited the public to come in.
Not just for the 1,800, property owners that are going to be affected, but for the rest of the township that thinks that they might be affected. And in fact, if they're not in that drain area, they're not going to receive the special tax assessment. So thank you.
Absolutely. Other publics would like to speak this evening. Anybody else in the audience would like to speak during public comment? Okay, we'll close public comment and we move on with the agenda. Next up is the consent agenda. What's the pleasure of the board on that?
I move to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Supported.
Moved and supported. All those, or Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Trustee Cascarella.
Support.
Treasurer Fedowa.
Yes.
Trustee Bowen.
Yes.
Trustee Brewer.
Yes.
Trustee Mohica.
Yes.
Clerk Clark is yes. Supervisor Fletcher.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Moving down to the items of business. Number 9, we have a request for a circus to come for an amusement and entertainment license, and the clerk's office recommends approval. What's the pleasure of the board? Mary, did you want to make the motion or talk on it?
Yes, for just a quick second. I'll do the motion so we can have some discussion. Sure. I recommend the Delta Township Board adopt the following resolution. The Delta Township Board grant an amusement and entertainment license to Garden Brothers Circus to hold a 4-day circus with numerous show times. The event will run August 1st, 2024. There's a number of shows each day. August 2nd, August 3rd, and August 4th. And further, the permit is granted subject to the following stipulations: that all other township ordinances and regulations be adhered to, that the fire marshal and electrical inspectors will perform inspections as required after the circus setup. Applicant must adhere to the 2015 International Fire Code regarding tents. Applicant must adhere to the 2014 tent display ordinance. The required insurance certificate and bond shall be on file with the clerk prior to issuance of permits. Security for the festival must be certified through the Massachusetts Crowd Manager course per Delta Township Fire Department. Certification is valid for 3 years. Further, that the fee for the amusement entertainment license has been paid in full, and the applicant of the festival shall be responsible for all operational requirements stated in section 616 of the amusement and entertainment ordinance.
Is there support?
Support.
There is support.
Okay.
And discussion.
Yeah, just real quick to let you know that this was put out for all the department heads that are applicable, and to Treasurer Fedowa as required by ordinance. And responses were received by the time requested. The ordinance, or the motion was written, and we have since had some comments from one of the departments. I've had a conversation with Eaton County AVI unit, the active violence unit, and I'll be having a phone conversation with the circus. But I will say that they have while we may want them to change 1 or 2 things, that is, both of those units are on site, fire and for the inspection, for if they want a fire extinguisher put in a certain place, that's what they're there for to do. And I will say it's the most thorough emergency plan that we have ever received for an event. It's a non-animal circus, which is what all circuses are now. They are quite talented acrobats, and it's a large circus that's coming. So great opportunity for families to come out.
Nice plug.
Excellent.
See no further discussion. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. Motion carries. Next item number 10, we have a request for a special land use permit from Henry Green to construct an accessory dwelling at his home at 5810 Cortina Trail. What's the pleasure of the board on that? Dennis.
I move that Delta Township Board approve the special land use permit request from Henry L. Green to construct a 580 square foot accessory dwelling unit attached to the primary dwelling at 5810 Cortina Trail, parcel number 040-080-600-05000, as described in case number PSL 2024-0007, subject to the following conditions of approval that are listed in our book, our packet. There are items 1 through 7.
Support.
It's been moved and supported. Any discussion? Andrea.
I just wanted to say I'm actually very excited to see, have a request for this approval. I recall again, when I served on Planning Commission, we worked on changing our ordinance. And a big part of it was allowing these dwellings, these attached dwellings, and really to accommodate so many of our residents as they're getting older, want to kind of stay in place. This allows families to really support their older family members, allow them independence, but to continue to live in a way that they can, that works well for everyone. And it's just, I think it was great and a lot of foresight from our planning department to create this opportunity because it didn't exist, and to afford this to residents, and especially our older residents. So I just wanted to share that I'm really excited that we're seeing this serve families in our community.
Any other discussion?
I too concur with what Andrea is saying. It just feels so great because Delta Township has always been an inclusive township. And so to include what would benefit some of our aging seniors, myself included, I think it's just terrific. I think it shows who we are and why Delta is so special, that we are looking for ways to allow people to age in place. And this is really a good solution.
Yes.
Well, I'll also attribute that we're part of the changing demographics, trustees. So I think we have a certain perspective on them. But no, I'm pleased with the department and also the board for doing this. So I concur with everything that's said.
Any other discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. Motion carries. Item number 11, we have another request for a special land use permit from the Lansing Board of Water and Light to install a battery energy storage system at their Delta Energy Park on Canal Road. What's the pleasure of the board? Fonda.
I move that the Delta Township Board approve the special land use permit amendment request for the Lansing Board of Water and Light to install a battery energy storage system at the Delta Energy Park located at 3725 South Canal Road, subject to the following conditions of approval. 1, approval is granted in accordance with the submitted Tetra Tech preliminary site layout dated May 21st, 2024. 2, failure of the applicant to comply with any of the provisions required by the zoning ordinance or any stipulations required by the Delta Township Board shall constitute grounds for termination of this permit by the Delta Township Board. 3, special land use permit approval is subject to the applicant granting the township an easement for a public shared use pathway. And 4, the applicant shall receive final site plan approval prior to establishing the use allowed by the special land use permit.
Support.
It's been moved and supported. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay, motion carries. Item number 12, there's a request for a variance from the sidewalk requirements for the new tailgaters development that will be coming in at 4930 South Kreitz Road. What's the pleasure of the board on that? Andrea.
I move that the Delta Township Board approve the sidewalk variance request for the project at 4930 South Kreitz Road in accordance with the criteria established in section 34.22 of the Code of Ordinances. Support.
It's been moved and supported. Any discussion? Andrew?
I did want to add a few comments. We've had a lot of discussion just for the board with the Zoning Board of Appeals with this project. Really exciting to see this investment in the community. I think given its location in the industrial part of the township, it makes sense, and it's kind of a little bit of an island there, so having sidewalks around this island just logically don't make sense, but wonderful to have the investment, wonderful facilities. If anyone's been to the other two locations in the greater Lansing area, just great facilities, and I think will be a tremendous investment in addition to that part of the township.
Thanks. Any other discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. Motion carries. Item number 13, the Engineering and Utilities Department recommends that we accept the bid from OHM Advisors for the Pepper Ridge Lift Station and Force Main project in the amount of $194,400. What's the pleasure of the board? And Beth.
I move that the Delta Township Board accept the proposal from OHM Advisors for the Pepper Ridge Lift Station and Force Main project in the amount of $194,400, and that the township manager be authorized and directed to execute the necessary documents related to the aforementioned project.
Is there support?
Support.
There is support. Any additional discussion? No. Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. Motion carries. Brian, manager's report.
Thank you, Mr. Supervisor and board members. Thanks to all of you who reached out on Anna. Just ask you keep her family and our finance department in your thoughts. She's a well-liked employee, and obviously have a small group there, Courtney and her folks. So just tough for them to go through. Today we went live with our BSNA cloud. So it's kind of a work in progress. We have BSNA reps on site all week who will be doing training. So each department is getting some guidance, but certainly a bit of a learning curve, but will be a great tool moving forward. A couple of project notes just to make you aware of if you haven't seen the manager's minute or Facebook post. Willow Highway is closed down over by the Werf plant for approximately 4 weeks to do some pipe reconfiguration with some important piping going into the plant. So we will hopefully work through that as quickly as possible because we certainly understand that's an inconvenience to folks, but a big necessary part of the Werf plant. Also, the Bel Air Hills Eaton County Drain Project is kicking off July 18th. So that neighborhood, which is up by our Willow Canoe Launch, will be affected a little bit. So we've put out notice on that, but that is a drain office project. We made it through the rain events pretty good. However, we did have to close our canoe launches for the time being, as well as Hunter's Orchard Park, just because of the water and the swift water in the river. Wanted to again congratulate Peter, who is assuming the role of planning director as well as the economic development director. So just really like to thank Peter for his leadership in these last several months, dating back probably 6 or 9 months, has really stepped in and filled in a very important role in the township to keep projects on track while we work through some transition issues. So we're very happy to have Peter stay with us and in this role. Just a reminder, so our next board meeting is August 12th, so we will not have the first meeting in August due to the election. So we'll have meetings on August 12th and 19th. And those will both be regular board meetings. And just a couple events in between now and then. We have our last Music in the Park tomorrow, which is Global Village in Sharp Park. Reminder, August 6th, we have National Night Out and Touch a Truck. So really made an effort to turn that into a larger event. So if you came out last year, they had a Black Hawk helicopter land. I think they are hoping to do the same thing this year. I know that's a election night, but a good event if you can make it out. We'll also have Kids Day, July 24th, 11 to 3. If you haven't known, Mary Clark passed along to me that Judge O'Neill for Eden County resigned due to health concerns. So I'd pass that along. So, with that, just I want to say, since it is our last meeting before the election, good luck to all of you trustee candidates, and happy to answer any questions.
I just want to add to Brian's comments about Willow being closed, and a thank you to Rick for putting it on our radar, because we unfortunately have a precinct impacted by this. So we had to move precinct 3 from the church on Broadbent because of construction to Great Lakes Christian College, which means it's on the other side of the construction. So we are going to be sending emails to all of our voters who are in precinct 3, advising them of the closure, giving them early voting hours, dates and times, so that they can come here and vote early if they want to cast a ballot, how to get an absentee ballot, or how to get to the precinct by going Willow to Canal to Saginaw to Kreitz to Willow. So we'll be doing all of that.
How long is that closure going to be?
It's a month.
Close to a month, yeah.
So it's with us or the school buses, and I get that it's us, but we just are going to communicate as much as possible, and I'll have Mary, when she's back, start putting out notices on our Facebook and that also. Because there's lots of options for people. With early voting, it makes a huge difference, because it would be very convenient for those residents if they have the ability. And we are open a couple evenings, as well as 2 Saturdays and 2 Sundays for early voting.
Any other questions for Brian? Seeing that? Okay, great. Thanks, Brian. We'll move to the committee of the whole portion of the meeting, and we have a discussion on fats, oils, and greases. I must say that's the first time I've seen that on the agenda. Turn it over to Rick.
Right.
Thank you, Supervisor Fletcher and board. Yep, discussion on fats, oils, and greases. Some ordinance, some primary changes we're looking to encompass. Basically, at the end of the presentation, we were asking for a head nod to proceed. I also have a couple of colleagues, Mike McCain, he's deputy director. He's been here many, like 40 years. And also Ken Herman as their water quality specialist. Ken, chemistry degree, U of M. He was in the private sector.
U of M, I don't know. That is really
He's got the blue shirt on.
My daughter goes to MSU.
Okay, they'll give you a pass then.
Yeah. But he's been with the township for 25 years, come from the private sector. He's our water quality specialist, and he kind of championed a lot of this ordinance language and movement. He oversees our IPP, our biosolids, our cross connection, our safety, oversees a crew of 3 guys, our inspections, very valuable key member. So we'll be kind of tag teaming this presentation. But fats, oils, and greases, there's 2 main categories. There's a polar, which is what everybody's mostly used, understands, bacon in the frying pan. That's your animal and fat and vegetable oil and greases. They're a triglyceride. They usually are the ones that are causing the blockages. And then the one that really is known, but it kind of is, it's the non-polar, but it's your petroleum based, your oils and greases, usually from automotive or manufacturing. Now, in our new ordinance changes, both greases or sources are going to be addressed. But both of them are, they cause problems, and they're both environmental impact and cause a big problem in the environment. Switch slides. And again, that's kind of why we're doing this. Again, the polar are going to solidify. You can see the pictures on the bottom. They're the nasty stuff. They cause the blockages. And then when you throw the disposable wipes in there, that's when you get the fat bergs and whatnot. But they're usually going to cause the backups. And, we call them SSOs, but they're surface sewage overflows. So you either have a backup in the basement or the restaurant or source or out in the collection system. And that's when it's twice as bad because it's getting into the environment, the storm water impacting our environment. They also cost money to control these. If you don't take it out at the source, we're going to deal with it. And collection systems and water resource facilities do not typically handle those pollutants. So it needs to be done at the source. And again, whenever you put sewage to the ground or backup, residents or businesses, there's always that possibility, hey, what's going to happen through liabilities. Next slide. So the real best way to control it is at the source, and it's usually through our local limits. Polar has a 300 milligram per liter limit, and our non-polar is 75 milligrams per liter. So our local limits is what we about every 5 years we look at those. You'll see something coming up next year that we're going to have to look at a good study of that with a new roof plan. Through local limits and then ordinances are how we control fats, oil, and greases. And that's why we're kind of here tonight. Again, we want to do this at the source, and that's what our ordinance is based around. Right, some of the control costs, again, if we don't take care of it at the source, we have to take care of it in another way. We have several locations where we're putting these bioenzymes, it's a high-graded organism that we actually physically take out and put it into the collection system. It's 26 manholes twice a week that we're putting this product in the system. And what it does is it takes it from a triglyceride, that solid, insoluble mass of offal, and it turns it into a soluble organic compound. And so if it's in solution, it'll flow, it won't cause blockages. And actually at the roof, we can treat organic compounds. It just takes an oxygen load, which one of our processes, we can supply air and manage that. So it does work, but again, it comes at a great expense. We're just treating a very, very, very fraction of amount of fog through this means because it's such an expense. And just for reference, again, we're checking 26 manholes twice a week, every week. We're also adding another 44 manholes that we're popping just to check and making sure that, it doesn't need the enzyme, but we have to make sure it's not going to have a blockage. We typically clean our collection system 14-inch or less diameter every 2 years. But there are several areas in the township that we're in there cleaning 4 times, 6 times, 8 times a year. So it adds manpower, labor, expense.
Do you know those areas? So you know where the pockets of problems exist?
Yes, we do.
Consistently?
Yep. It is kind of scattered. Some of it's residential, some of it's our corridor. as a rule of thumb, most, as that community average of, United States, they'll say residential grease is about 50% of your fog. Here in the township, it's really not weighted that high. We have such, active corridor that it's really not weighted there. But there is a significant amount of grease that does come from households. The analytical sampling testing, that's labor and manpower. Usually, go ahead.
I'm sorry, I don't want, before you got off too much on your last comments about kind of knowing the location and sources. I just had a question. I don't know if you can explain what our current ordinance is, and then you mentioned, well, maybe you're not. I might have jumped ahead of you. Maybe I need to wait till you get to the next slide. I was just trying to understand what you're proposing as potentially as a change to the ordinance. Yeah, sorry.
Yep.
Yeah, I got ahead of you. I just was thinking about it as Fonda was asking her questions.
That's Ken's slide.
Sorry.
The way it works right now, just basically when our collection system sees a bad area that we need to either, it's a new area or it's an area that we know about that we have to clean it again and again and again. They usually contact Ken's crew, and then our inspectors go out and meet with the area. Most generally, it's not the residents, but sometimes it is, where we try to find an HOA president or people who listen to us. But usually it's our corridor. And there are guys who go out and have a heart-to-heart conversation, explain what's going on. And, but it all takes manpower and time. Here's Ken's slide.
Good evening, everyone. To address Trustee Brewer's question, like Rick said, we have well over 100 food service locations that we inspect at least annually, if not more often, based on past history of grease issues. We go out all the time, do manhole checks, and when we see problems, we go into the facility and address it with the managers, as to what's going on and what they can potentially do to try to help us with the issue. So Trustee Cascarella wanted to know, my portion is, why are we going to, or why do we want to change the ordinance for fog? The new fog ordinance is basically going to make the existing language, which is pretty general, more exact and well-defined, and will include many important aspects of control that are not currently in the language. The new fog ordinance changes is going to have 8 parts plus some definitions. The definitions basically are going to clearly define terminology that we utilize in our fog control program. Part A basically talks about interceptors and control manholes are going to be required. One of the issues that we run across quite often is food service locations don't have a control manhole. Their line will just go right into the main line, and there's no way to really distinguish how much grease they're putting into the system. So for quite a while now, we've been requiring a control manhole, but we'd like to actually put that into the ordinance, as well as requiring that all businesses, food service establishments have an interceptor, and preferably an external one. So that's the first part. A large portion of interceptor and controlling of grease is going to be having that manhole for each particular business. It'll also somewhat address or help us address existing locations that may have things that we need to improve upon. There's typically 3 things that can be a problem with an existing location. If they don't have any way to control their grease through an interceptor or a control manhole for us, what we want in the ordinance is If they're gonna pull a permit because they have to do any type of extensive work at the location, we wanna use that as an in to have them upgrade what needs to be done in order to help us control that grease at that location. The second thing is they could potentially have failures of existing equipment. So we want to make sure that it's addressed, that if there is a failure, we have the means through ordinance to make them address it. And then the last one under this part is locations that have significant non-compliance issues. In other words, they haven't been meeting our local limits, or that we know through our manhole checks that they've been putting a lot of fog into the system. It'll just give us a little bit more to be able to control that at the location or at the business. So those three things are key that we want to do with the existing businesses. The second part of the ordinance, part B, is going to talk about intercept performance requirements. Basically, this section is just going to tell the township what the requirements of the interceptor they propose putting in will be, and it'll give the building department the opportunity to approve or disapprove it based on what's acceptable. So that's part B. Part C is the actual interceptor installation requirements. The new ordinance, one of the things that we find, a lot of the control interceptors that are used out in the food establishments right now are size too small. So we'd like to put in right from the get-go in the ordinance that it's a minimum 1,000 gallon size interceptor that has to be put in. That way, we'd rather err on the size of being maybe a little bit too large to control the grease and make sure they're capturing as much as possible than to have one too small put in. And once it's in the ground and being utilized, it's really hard to make any changes at that point. So,
if I may on that, just a little bit of clarity, because I know you've talked about both residential and business, commercial uses and problems with challenges with both, with fog. But when you're talking about control manholes and interceptors, are you speaking to both users, I guess? Or, I mean, are there going to be requirements for residential property owners to,
no,
is that more just on the commercial side?
This is strictly discussing food service establishments or anyone that has a business that might be producing fog and discharging it to the system.
I appreciate that clarification. Thank you.
Usually when we deal with residential, we do that through the Delta Now and flyers and communication and just just facts.
But they're not, residents are putting in interceptors and.
Right.
Yeah,
it's very difficult to do any type of control on a residential property.
I just wanted to make sure. I didn't see that clarity, so.
Unfortunately, I mean, it's just really no way to do that, so.
It's usually best management practices.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, is there, so the business owners would be responsible for the cost and the installation?
Yes.
And what's kind of the ballpark? Is there a price that you can share with us? Like what does it cost for the interceptor or the control manhole?
I don't personally usually see any of that information. Someone from the building department that actually sees permits might have a better understanding of the cost based on the location and what type and who's going to provide the materials and the people putting it in.
Usually in a project, this type of treatment or capture is usually very economical. Usually the more difficult situation, and we counter this a lot, and I don't want to pick on shoe stores, trust me, but it's a shoe store one day, it's a high generating fog restaurant the next day. And the building space is not equipped to easily make those alterations or changes. That's where it gets expensive. But as far as, purchasing the equipment and installing it, does have a cost. It's thousands of dollars, but it's not in relative to the project.
Okay. And if, for example, like I think of the Lansing Mall, it just came to mind, and they have a restaurant corridor. So would every restaurant in that corridor need to have its own interceptor, or is there a common interceptor manhole for that block of restaurants in that mall?
Yeah, that is the difficult, as I mentioned, trying to retrofit. The plumbing in the Lansing Mall is not conducive to separating each individual waste. A lot of the strip malling isn't. In the last couple of years, an example, Della Crossing, that strip mall on phase 1, through site plan and in our reviews, engineering and utilities, we did not allow them to put the waste sanitary pipe down the center of the store to collect all of them right down the middle. And then now we forced them to put that sanitary pipe about 40 feet behind the store. So, and then run an individual lead from each suite to the sanitary main. So now when it goes from a clothing store or whatever, merchandise store to a high fog restaurant or entity, they have room and the capability to put that in a lot more economically. Okay. And we're going to start promoting that more and more in for that application.
And under that structure, it's easy to administer the ordinance. So you know specifically which of those businesses you're going to be dealing with if there is a challenge or a problem.
Correct.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. And as Rick mentioned, the best way to control fog is at the source. We talk a lot about the external interceptor, which is what we prefer and what we try to have everyone install. There is also an internal grease trap or interceptor that can be utilized as well. The Lansing Mall is one of the locations where that's pretty much the way everyone does it, is through an inside grease trap or interceptor. And each location would have their own small unit. But the problem with those smaller units, they need to be cleaned practically every day or every week. You have to have usually the staff do it, and usually, these things are pretty nasty, and people just don't like to do that. So it gets overlooked quite often. So, all right. The next part is part D. That's interceptor inspections and maintenance. Basically, the existing language refers to maintenance, but the new fog ordinance is clearly going to state what maintenance needs to be performed, and then also what might constitute increasing that maintenance frequency. So it's going to basically say they're going to need a larger interceptor from the start, which is good for us. But if we go out and do our inspection and find that they're not cleaning it often enough, or we're finding a lot of grease in the line after the interceptor, then we'll go back to the manager of that establishment and request that they bump up their frequency. So if they're doing it every 90 days, then we may request, let's try 60 days and see how that handles the fog. And then if it continues to be an issue, then we'll bump it to every 30 days. So that language will also be in the new ordinance. Part E talks about best management practices. Now, this is something that's clearly stated in the new fog ordinance. It was not in the old one. But again, we want to control it at the source. And if we can remove fog before it even gets into the drain, that's the best way to go. And so we made one section just discuss the BMPs and how best to try to eliminate grease before it even reaches the drain. Part F is record keeping. The new fog language will define exactly what information should be kept by these food service establishments for their grease management and how long the records need to be kept. I don't believe the existing ordinance language says how long the records have to be kept, where this one will explicitly say, 3 years is how long they have to have those records available to us so that we can make sure they're doing the necessary cleaning and maintenance. Part G talks about fog interceptor and control manhole inspections. Again, this new language will just clearly define the township's right to go on their property, sample from the control manhole, as well as inspect all aspects of the interceptor and their program for record keeping, making sure they're doing the maintenance, having it cleaned out at the proper frequencies and everything. And then the last. Hold on, we got a question. Yes, Trustee Mike.
Yeah, hi. Does this come with any kind of fines attached with the new changes, or if you bring in new language, is this going to be attached to a fine or anything like that?
That's the section I'm going to wrap up with, okay. The last section.
Sorry.
No, that's perfectly fine. Part H, which is the last section, does talk about charges related to fog. Currently, we do have a few ways to charge a food service establishment if they're not controlling fog properly. The new ordinance, however, is going to give us a little bit more flexibility. Under section 40-425, we do have the fines in that section, but those are very steep, very high as far as the cost to the establishment. The new language will allow us to give out smaller fines for things that are just, let's say they're just not cleaning the trap as often as they should. And we can just give them a verbal warning, you know, this is the frequency that we expect to see. And then if we go back in a follow-up inspection, they're still not doing it, then probably give them a smaller fine versus the hefty $1,000, $3,000, $5,000 fine that's under 425.
Oh, wow.
So it does allow for that. It also allows us in cases where people basically are discharging and creating severe issues and are not heeding us, asking them to help us with taking care of this issue. It will say that we can actually stop their water service. And I know from the cross connection control program, when you turn someone's water off, things tend to get done very quickly. Right. So that will also be one of the things that'll be in the new ordinance.
Oh, thank you.
So that's just some of the general things, just touching on some of what I thought were some of the more important items that will be in this new language and the new ordinance that you should be aware of. Yes. Any further questions?
Pretty extensive ordinance remake. Is this something you guys did from scratch, or is this like a national model that you've taken off with and copied as a basis? And the second part of that question is, how does this new ordinance compare to surrounding communities in like City of Lansing, East Lansing, for example, Meridian Township?
Some of the other ordinances in the local area, I would say, are not this extensive. The fog ordinance is something that we've talked about and worked on for several years. It's such a large issue. It has such a large cost and manpower associated with controlling this. We've been trying to get a really good fog ordinance in place for a long time. So yes, there is a lot of language there. We really feel that all of it is necessary to help in controlling this issue. And for the most part, it is more extensive than what I've seen in other townships or cities in our area.
So you're telling me that you did compose a lot of this in-house, so it's new?
Some of it is from in-house sources, and some is also adapting one of the, I don't know what their
supplier.
Yeah, supplier of.
There's a couple of suppliers, grease interceptor suppliers, did publish some templates. So we took the templates, we took our current ordinance, we took what our neighboring ordinance language looks like, and then really put that in a pile and then say, what do we want our ordinance to do? Right. And then brought it in, those templates,
you're kind of picking and choosing what the best language that meets our needs. And like, yes. Yeah, this is my last clarification. What I'm gathering from your discussion is the large majority of the corridor problems originate from food, from restaurants, not necessarily oil change facilities or anything like that.
That is correct. The majority of the blockages do originate from a food source rather than a petroleum-based source. Yeah. But that's not to say we don't have issues with some of the petroleum industries out there, because we have had, but usually those are a little different, and it's more of an environmental impact immediately when they're discharging stuff versus the food, which can lead to the blockages and the pumps not working and things of that nature.
So with this ordinance, is it adequate to address those issues as well?
It will be, yes.
Because we have both components, the polar and the non-polar in it. And just for clarity, if it's a non-polar source, they do put interceptors, what they're called sand oil separators. Again, they're a different, they don't congeal. Non-polar doesn't congeal like the polar does. It's more of a pass-through sheen, oil sheen, and that kind of stuff. So you capture it. And they have their own mathematics of sizing and whatnot, but there are interceptors or traps that do the same function.
Thank you.
Andrew.
Just want to thank you both for a great overview, really helpful just to help us start thinking about and understand what will be coming, and certainly look forward to details of the proposed ordinance. Do want to commend you though for the approach, because it really sounds like you're building in a lot of education and working with businesses to help ensure they're utilizing best practices to minimize, you know, the fog that they're.
I think it'll give them a lot better understanding of what our expectations are, which I think is important for them to be able to see it in writing, so that when we do the inspections, you know, they can look back at the ordinance and say, oh, okay, yeah, it's there. This is what we got to do.
And that's great. And I think at the end of the day, having some teeth in there is important, because we need, you know, I think the approach to educate first and improve practices is the right approach to take. At some point, if you know, there are establishments that aren't complying, we need to work with them and try and ensure they do. And I think about this so much, and I know, Mark, you started the presentation kind of talking about the disposable wipes, and it's been a huge problem here, probably every single community across our state and across the country. And it's extremely costly. And you have some people that, and we went to great lengths to try to educate residents about that, but flushing those wipes and the huge problem it causes, and the cost to all residents then to address that. And so being able to target where those problems are and really directly address it, I think is really going to be helpful to us, and avoid that cost being borne by all in the township when they might not be the bad actors in that case, or unintentional bad actors.
Right.
So thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Excellent presentation. And I love that you're looking for ways to try to get in front of what could become even a bigger problem. I was just looking at your next steps. Just a question for you in looking at the stages of how this is going to be introduced. It's going to go to Eagle, and then it'll come back to the board. But if we have a slight tweak in something, or a suggested tweak, does it have to go all the way back, like to the attorney and then to Eagle again? Or will we see it as you're going to present it?
So currently in the ordinance changes that we're going to be adopting, or trying to put through the board, Trustee Brewer, is two different things. The one that we'll have to have go to Eagle for the 30-day review and public comment is actually another portion of what we do in utilities for our industrial pretreatment program. Fortunately, the fog aspect of the ordinance changes, we don't have to send those to Eagle. So that part is fortunate. The portion that does have to go to Eagle, we've already sent the changes to them for review, so that what we want to update the ordinance language to for the streamlining is already approved by them, at least, so that when the attorneys look at it and if they make any changes, hopefully Eagle will still be on board, unless it's something real severe. So hopefully there won't be this back and forth.
Okay.
Is the Eagle, oh, sorry. Well, that sort of goes to my question. I wanted to know if there's any overlap between what we're planning to do with our fog ordinances and what the county health department does when they do restaurant inspections, or what MDR does when they do grocery store inspections or anything like that. Do they address this kind of grease outlet? I mean, I know we're addressing it because it goes into our wastewater system, but are there other units that might have some ordinances or rules or procedures that we can either work with them?
That's a good question, Trustee Bowen. In our experience, we all have our own agenda, and what we're trying to accomplish through our fog ordinance, and when we do our inspections of the food service establishments, the other agencies, they're not really concerned with that.
Okay.
So I can't really speak to the specific things they're looking for, because I haven't actually spoken to one directly and asked them several questions about it. But I know they're not trying to do the same thing we are with our inspections.
Okay. But it might be, it might be something
there
worth
may be some overlap
discussing and just saying, because everybody's interested in safety, food safety, and the public health safety. So, just to put it out there and say,
yeah, one thing I could say is, like, on the internal grease traps, I'm sure when they come in and inspect food service, they're looking at, okay, how do you clean it and how do we make sure none of that nastiness is getting into the food sources?
And the process and the number of times that they do
the
it.
The external ones, those are outside.
That would be your purview. Okay.
Andrea. Just a quick question. When you were talking about the Eagle review, is that tied to our MPDES permit then, and making sure it's compliant through that process? Okay.
Yes, and basically the streamlining basically brings in the federal EPA language to match, to make sure we have the strength language.
Okay, thank you.
Great.
Any other questions? Well, great. I think everybody's in agreement to move forward on this. When you first started talking about triglycerides and blockages, it sounded like a doctor for a little bit. So I was afraid you were going to tell me I have to change my diet like he does. So just to clarify, I can still put grease in my arteries, but I can't put it down the drain.
Yes, still eat the bacon. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, guys, for bringing this to our attention.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Board members have any final things? Beth?
I did. I wanted to let my fellow board members know, in case anyone has not been hearing from residents, there have been a couple of residents reach out to me about some of the housing projects in the township and asking questions about what is this housing, why is this housing, who housing, that sort of thing. And so I just wanted to say that, we always say that Delta is a great place to live, work, and play, and we should be pleased that people want to live here and that they want to have housing that's safe and adequate and that they can afford. And I'm looking forward to the board working toward that goal of housing. And also, I love answering these questions and working with residents so they understand that developed property means more money for fire and police. And, that's good for the township. It's good for all of us.
Other topics from the board like to raise? Anybody? Final public comment? Anybody in the audience would like to speak a final time before we adjourn? Now's your opportunity. Seeing no one coming forward and seeing no further business before us, we are adjourned.